A surprise agreement to resume direct flights between Cairo and Tehran after 30 years is leaving the region confused. A strictly business deal or the beginning of a thawing in relations? And what might it mean for a region torn by competing powers? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Sami Zaidan. Well, for the last 3 decades, diplomatic ties between Iran and Egypt have been, well, non-existent. Yet in a move that left many baffled, the old rivals have signed an accord agreeing to begin 28 weekly flights between the two countries. Well, Iran's semi-official Fars news agency suggested this could be the beginning of a resumption of diplomatic relations. Now, traditionally, both have been backing opposing political camps in Iraq, Lebanon and the Palestinian territory. So as US sanctions on Iran begin to bite, and with the Middle East talks on the brink of collapse, well, the agreement is raising many questions. Joining us now to discuss the issues further are our guests in Cairo, Mustafa Labad, Director of the Al-Sharq Center for Regional and Strategic Studies. From Tehran, Sadiq Zibakalam, Professor of Politics at Tehran University. And in Washington, D.C., Khalil Jahshan, a Middle East analyst and lecturer at Pepperdine University. Thanks so much for joining us. If I could start with Mr. Zibakalam, is this the start of a new chapter in relations between Egypt and Iran?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think it's a bit perhaps too early to say that it is a new chapter, but definitely it is a bold move by the Iranian president, Mr. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, to launch the direct flight between Tehran and Cairo. I must caution you.
Then what is it, though? What's prompted him to do this then, if it's not a new chapter in relations?
Well, Ahmadinejad loves to take this bold initiative and bold decision to maneuver in places, in areas that nobody has dared to maneuver before, because you must remember that there are many opponents, hardline opponents in Iran of any normalization, of any resumption of diplomatic move between Tehran and Cairo. Many people within President Ahmadinejad's political side would actually criticize him for and caution him that Mr. Ahmadinejad, we warn you, and you shouldn't get too close to Egypt, because Egypt is regarded in Iran, rightly or wrongly, Egypt is regarded in Iran as bastion of United States, as a close ally to Israel. So many hardliners, many Islamists in Iran are very unhappy about any move.
Let me try and bring in Mr. Mustafa Labad into the discussion. What is in it for Egypt at this point? Is Egypt seeing this as a start of a new chapter?
I don't think, because Egypt is interested in improving relations to Iran, but I share the views of Professor Zibakalam that it's not the new beginning of a relationship between Egypt and Iran after 30 years. I think it is a good move, it's a positive step, but we don't have to over-evaluate such circumstances, because Egypt and Iran had historical ties, and frequently, occasionally, every year we have high up. So last year we did receive Mr. Larijani, the Speaker of Parliament, and many observers thought that that's the new beginning of new relation between Cairo and Tehran, and it was not the case.
All right, so but this time they have signed, if I may jump in, this time they have actually signed some sort of agreement with some, if it goes ahead, sort of tangible change to the political map between Egypt and Iran. Why, from the Egyptian perspective?
I think from Egyptian perspective, it should be that Iran cannot be neglected anymore in the balances of the Middle East. Iran is an historical entity. Iran is possessing influential position through the Middle East, the Levant, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran's dominance in the Persian Gulf. So Egypt should improve ties to all major powers in the region and not to exclude anyone of it. Egypt has a relationship with Israel. Egypt has a relationship with Saudi Arabia, with Turkey, but no good relationship with Iran. I think it is vital for Egyptian national interest to be open to all major powers, and Iran sure is a major power in the Middle East.
All right, Khalil Jahshan, planes don't land in the Middle East without some sort of political green light, do they? What's going on here?
Well, I think it's a positive step in terms of renewing such a limited step between the two countries. But frankly, it's way overblown in the sense that when you put it in the context of the tense relationship over the past 30 years, the fact that there has been many ups and downs in the relationship, many steps, limited steps like that, have been taking place over the years, and nothing has really emerged in terms of renewing diplomatic relations between the two countries as a follow-up to such steps. I would say it's kind of, it's a nice limited step toward nowhere. It's a much ado about nothing. I don't see it as a step that would change the balance of power in the region to the extent that it would lead to renewing relations between the two countries.
Could Egypt be sending a message to the United States at a time when the peace process seems to be faltering? Is it trying to increase its leverage?
Frankly, that has happened before, yes. Egypt has used relationships or steps toward Tehran as a message to the United States. If you remember, during the Bush administration, when there was a lot of criticism here in Washington of Egyptian human rights policies and cracking down on dissent in Egypt, Egypt took several steps toward Iran, including high-level meetings, welcoming guests from the National Security Council of Iran, Larjani, welcoming the Speaker of the House. And these were two meetings, for example, that were the first significant and substantive meetings in almost 30 years between the two countries. And they were considered a message to Washington that Egypt has its own foreign policy and that Egypt needs to be taken seriously as a regional ally for the United States.
Okay, so political, should we say external political factors may be playing a role here. I'd like to pose the question to Mr. Ziba Kalam whether economic factors may also be part of the equation here. When you take into account, we're hearing that Egypt's considering importing wheat from Iran for the first time, at the same time as we know Iran is looking for some kind of outlet from biting economic sanctions, isn't it?
Yes, I think you're right. There are obviously economic consideration at the back of President Ahmadinejad and the other Iranian leaders. As you are aware, Iran is trying to alleviate the pressure of sanctions, and obviously Egypt is a very important Middle Eastern state. So in view of possible more sanctions in future, Iran is obviously trying to win the relation with Cairo as a bargaining chip, if you like, for future if there are harder sanctions against Iran. But of course, that's from the Iranian point of view. I would like to say that from the Egyptian point of view, Iran is also a key player as far as radical Islamism throughout the Middle East is concerned. Iran has a very good relation with the Lebanese Shiite. Iran has a very good relation with Islamists in Palestine, with Hamas, with Islamic Jihad. So in a sense, it's Egypt who needs Iran to break ice with Islamists in the Middle East.
All right, let's, talking of the Egyptian view, let's return to Mr. Al-Labad. We've got one guest here saying economic factors may be playing a role in this move. We've got Khalil Jahshan saying perhaps external political factors may also be playing a role here. My question to you is, how far could these factors go in actually forging a better relationship between the two countries? Could it take them all the way?
I think all factors are playing a role in improving ties, economic as well as political factors. But I think Egypt will go in limited steps in order to send messages, maybe to import wheat. But I don't think that Egypt and Iran in these circumstances are going to build a normal ties, because there is many differences in many dossiers, in security in the Gulf, Iranian influence in Iraq, and Iranian influence in among Shiite groups in Lebanon. So I don't think that there is common sense between Egypt and Iran about the influence in the Middle East. But I think that Egypt is willing to come back, not to neglect Iran, and then not to over-evaluate this step. So Iran needs Egypt maybe more than Egypt needs Iran, because Iran is looking to widen its margin of maneuver regarding the sanctions, and Iran maybe is willing to divide the so-called moderate Arab state, the bloc of moderate Arab state between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Iran maybe is interested to make a rift and then to maneuver among this rift between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And Egypt is also willing to negotiate with Iran in limited issues in order to achieve goals in limited issues, but not a package, not an alliance, and not a wider cooperation. So that's the realistic view of this tip.
Well, boy, you put your hand on a whole bunch of issues I want to pick on there. But before we do get more into the differences between the two countries, let's remind ourselves of what those differences are. Well, for 30 years, as you may know, Egypt and Iran have actually sniped at each other from afar, you could say. Ties were damaged first following the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, when Egypt's then President Anwar al-Sadat offered the Shah asylum. Well, Cairo's decision the same year to recognize Israel severed relations completely. Well, although tensions eased for a while in 2008, well, the two countries found themselves at odds once again, this time over the conflict in Gaza. In January 2009, the Iranian President Ahmadinejad accused Egypt of being a partner in crimes in Gaza for what he said was Cairo's failure to support the Palestinians. Egypt retaliated that month, barring an Iranian aid ship traveling to Gaza from passing through the Suez Canal, and relations further deteriorated in April 2009 when Egyptian authorities arrested alleged members of Hezbollah in Egypt. Accused of hostile operations, they believed Iran was really behind many of the planned actions. Well, let's take the discussion once again to Khalil Jahshan in the US. Are the differences between Iran and Egypt so irreconcilable as some of our guests are stating?
I don't think so. There are serious differences. They are very significant. They're very historic. But at the same time, these are the same differences that all other Arab countries have with Iran, in a way. And so the question is,
but that doesn't make it any easier for Egypt, does it? I mean, they disagree on everything from Iraq, Lebanon, the Palestinian territories.
Right, right. But at the same time, I mean, you know, what led to the disruption of the relationship was kind of unique in terms of the bilateral relationship between the two, and the fact that these same differences that exist between Iran and Riyadh, between, you know, Iran and many other countries in the Arab world have not prevented diplomatic relations from taking place. So diplomatic relations can be renewed between the two countries with the existence of all these differences. But these differences, you know, kind of go beyond. I think there is a historical element of competition between the two countries that goes back to the traditional Arab versus Persian, to the traditional Sunni versus Shia differences between how the two countries view themselves as leaders in those respective camps. And then, you know, these traditional differences between the two capitals have come up to haunt both sides when it comes to more contemporary issues, like you refer to the issue of Gaza, the issue of the situation in Lebanon, the situation in Palestine, and so on. But that shouldn't prevent, in the long term, diplomatic relations from being renewed between the two countries if both capitals deem that in their national interest.
All right, let's take the discussion to Tehran. Has it got to do with personal rivalries? Does it make a difference who leads the two countries? We've seen in the past an attempt to improve relations under former Iranian presidents. Is it really down to who happens to be in power in Cairo and Tehran?
Yes, to some extent you are right. I dare say that if ex-President Khatami, a reformist president, was in power, we would have observed much more intense opposition from the radicals in Iran. But in the case of Ahmadinejad, if you like, he is finding it a much softer approach from hardline critics. But at the same time, there are many in Iran, many academics, many journalists, many Islamic leaders, both inside the government, outside the government, who have always stated Cairo, Egypt, is the key to Arab world. And it is true that Egypt is a principal ally of United States, the arch enemy of Islamic Iran. It is true that Egypt is the ally of a state of Israel, another arch enemy of Iran. Nevertheless, many Iranians believe that we cannot look upon the Arab world excluding Egypt. Iran must have some sort of relationship with Egypt in order to have a viable and realistic policy towards the Arab world. Without Egypt, Iran cannot have a realistic policy towards the Arab world. Because of that, many Iranians deep down feel and think that there must be some kind of rapprochement with Egypt, whoever is in power in Egypt.
All right, the feeling of perhaps there should be some rapprochement, but let me ask Mr. Labad, is it really ever possible to put away the long historical rivalry between two powerful regional powers?
I think the history of relationship between Egypt and Iran was not only competition, it was also closer ties during the late king of Egypt, Farouk, and the late Shah of Iran, who married the sister of Farouk. And even in 70 and 80, during the 70 decade, President Sadat in Egypt and the late Shah. So,
but some might argue, Mr. Labad, that was under the strong Western hegemony that perhaps wanted these countries to be on the same page. Has it got to do with other factors outside of the control of Cairo and Tehran?
I think you are right in some degree. Of course, many capitals would not be happy if Egypt and Iran are making a reconciliation process and the relation will be normal again. But regarding to the colleague in Washington, many Arab states have differences towards Iran, and he mentioned Saudi Arabia or other Arab Gulf states. But they have borders, maritime borders with Iran. Egypt has no border to Iran, so we cannot compare the situation Saudi Arabia, Iran, or Gulf states, Iran, with Egypt, Iran. So in Egypt, you have the privilege to think twice about such relationship. But if you have borders and you have many issues directly, maybe you don't have such luxury. Again, to your question, I think I would advise Egyptian foreign policy to be more active regarding not only Iran, but to renew Egyptian instruments. We are seeing Egyptian influence is diminishing in the region. So if Egypt wants to come back, a limited comeback, I think Egypt should be open to all major powers, and Iran one of them. Don't forget that the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, issued a fatwa a few days ago that is condemning to have bad manner towards the wives of the Prophet, peace upon him. So it was against toward the Sunnah Muslims, and it was its timing was as deputy president of Iran was visiting Egypt 2 days ago. So it was a sign, it was a guest from Iran to Egypt, and Al-Azhar was directly by welcoming such a fatwa. So you have complicated issues are playing together. Religious one, Sunni, Shia, and Egypt. Egypt is the country who can mediate really between Sunni and Shia and to overbridge such a division because of many factors.
Right,
and then you have...
if I may jump in here, sorry, and bring in Mr. Khalil Jahshan. Is it a flight of fantasy to think that perhaps this sort of reaching out might somehow get Egypt out of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the staunch moderate camp, pro-US camp, whatever you want to call it, to if not be in the pro-Iranian camp, but somewhere in between, somewhere of a bridge?
Definitely. I don't think Iran can offer enough of an incentive for Egypt to switch, if you will, alliances in this respect.
What about what our guest in Tehran has said, in his opinion, the card of, as he put it, radical Islam, that it should be something that it could offer Cairo?
I don't think so. Actually, it's the opposite. I mean, Egypt does not need Iran to have a relationship with Hamas or with Hezbollah, for that matter. Yes, both have, in recent years, cemented a strong relationship with Tehran, but Egypt doesn't need Tehran to mediate a relationship between, Cairo and any Arab party, for that matter. As a matter of fact, it's the contrary. It is that relationship that has distanced, if you will, Egypt from Tehran. I mean, the recent confrontation over Hezbollah's activities in Egypt, Hezbollah's activities in Gaza, Hamas activities and attempts to smuggle arms from Iran, these have contributed to even accentuating the differences between Tehran and Cairo rather than bridging the gap. I think that's definitely an over-exaggerated notion. But in terms of the relationship between Egypt and Iran, I don't think Iran has enough to offer to substitute, if you will, for the alliance and the benefits from that alliance with the West that Egypt has had for such a long time, whether it's at the economic, at the strategic, or at the political level.
All right, let's take those points to Tehran. Mr. Ziba Kalam, does Iran really have anything of substance to offer Cairo?
Well, I don't think it is correct to argue that which country would benefit more, whether the Islamic Iran would benefit more from relation with Egypt, or is it Egypt who would benefit more from Iran? As I said,
but it does seem that it's been the case of Cairo dragging its feet more towards overtures from Iran rather than the other way around, doesn't it?
From the closer ties between the two countries. Now, we might argue and say that the benefits of Iran are more important, or the benefit from Egypt is more important. Which one are more crucial? But the fact of the matter is that both countries would benefit from stronger and closer ties between them. But as I said before, there are many elements within the Islamic Iran who actually would oppose such a move. Let us not forget that one of the stumbling blocks during the past 3 decades have been two names. The name of Khaled Istanbuli on one of main streets in northern Tehran, and the name of late Shah in one of the streets in Cairo. Now, both of them have to be removed someday if there are realistic possibility of relation between the two countries. But I dare say I cannot imagine how on earth anyone, even Ahmadinejad, would dare to strike the name of Khaled Istanbuli from that street in Tehran.
All right, we'll leave the discussion there. Let's thank our guests in Cairo, Mustafa Labad, in Tehran, Sadiq Ziba Kalam, and in Washington, D.C., Khalil Jahshan. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. You can send us your comments and suggestions anytime. Just email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, it's goodbye.